So you started playing around with Midjourney version 5, but for some reason, none of your old version 4 prompts seem to be doing what you want them to do. And worst of all, you just can't seem to get consistent characters anymore. Don't worry, we're all in the same boat here. Version 5 is clearly putting a lot of us to the test. Because let's be honest, version 4 did so much of the heavy lifting. But version 5 forces us to grow and improve our skills, and that's a good thing. I was curious to find out whether any of my previous methods for creating consistent characters still work in version 5. I also wanted to see whether I could bring Carla Caruso back to life. So if you're curious to find out what worked and what didn't, then stick around. So I started off by doing what everybody would do. I simply entered my old V4 prompt in order to find out what would happen. Here's a very simple prompt for Carla Caruso. Imagine frontal close-up on white background, beautiful woman, bright red braided bun hair, only red hair, in the style of a Marvel comic book, and a version parameter of 5. And just for reference, here's what that very same prompt gave us in version 4. However, in version 5, we get these images. And I know exactly what you're thinking. Meh. Sure, these are super realistic. But coherence isn't the issue here. It's the style. This simply isn't what we want. And of course, it's super frustrating when you add a style to your prompt, but then it just gets ignored by Midjourney. So I did a little bit of experimenting, and it's become clear to me that version 5 of Midjourney requires a different prompt structure than before. I decided to switch things around a little bit and simply move the style part of the prompt to the front of the prompt. Imagine Marvel comic illustration and then followed by headshot of a beautiful woman with bright red braided bun hair. And voila, this is already much better. However, it's still not the exact same type of style that we got before when we were using version 4. It's true that this style is much closer to a Marvel comic book. I'll grant you that. And I guess this also says a lot about the additional stylization that version 4 has been inserting into our images just by default. But I would really like to try to get our old Carla back, or at least something that looks even remotely similar. So I had another closer look at the original images. The illustration is much more polished here, almost like a 2D version of a 3D character. I know, this is kind of an oxymoron. But let's try the following prompt. Imagine blend between Marvel comic illustration and 3D animation style, headshot of a beautiful woman with bright red braided bun hair. So what exactly did I try to do here? Well, I'm trying to tell Midjourney that I would like it to use a style that is a combination between a Marvel comic book style as well as 3D animation. And if we look at our initial results, you can see that while we're still not quite there, it's definitely had an impact on the image. In fact, these are just a little bit too 3D-like. One thing that I did notice in the old images is that Carla does have some very subtle Asian features. And I mean really subtle. But some of them do remind me of anime characters. So what if we add anime into the mix? Imagine style like Marvel comic illustration and 3D animation and anime, and then followed by the rest of our prompt. As you can see, I've added anime to the prompt. And here's what the images look like. I would like to point out that we're finally seeing a lot more people of color when we're using prompts that use the word beautiful. These women may not look anything like Carla. However, the latent bias of some of these AI models is clearly being addressed. So if we just look at the style, we can clearly see that this is much more like the polished, very stylized look that we've gotten used to from version 4. This also demonstrates some of the stylistic range of version 5. Prompting might be harder now, however you can still cook up anything you want as long as you're using the right words in your prompt. Here are a few more examples if I simply re-roll the very same prompt. To be honest, I feel quite comfortable just sticking with this style that we have. I am, however, going to make a few adjustments to our prompt nonetheless. I've added on-white background to our style because I'm trying to replicate what we did with Carla in version 4. I've also added close-up just to make sure that we get the closest possible portrait shot of her. I've changed beautiful woman to attractive European woman simply because our Carla was of European descent. And finally, I've added the stylize parameter with a value of 1000. In version 4, I basically never used the stylize parameter, simply because the images were already extremely stylized to begin with. However, in version 5, I feel like I may need to add this just in order to get the same kind of style that we had with our old Carla. But careful, I'm not saying you should always do this. This is very specific to this particular example that I'm showing you here. Here's the first set of images. From these, I'll keep the top left one, and then I'll keep re-rolling until I find a few images that I like. And here's the second set, of which I'll keep the top left and the bottom right images. And now it's time to start creating a consistent character in version 5. So just to recap, here are the 3 image references that we're going to use. I made sure to pick slightly different styles and different poses. I'm going to repeat the very same prompt, except that I'm going to add our image references as image prompts. Imagine, and then we start off with our 3 image prompts, followed by the exact same prompt that we just used before. Technically, we could use the image weight parameter in order to control the influence that these image prompts have on our overall prompt. However, we're going to skip this part for now. I'll show you how that works a little later on. Here's the first set of images. If you ignore the character for a moment and simply focus on the style, you can clearly see that it's much closer to the original style that we had. So from these, I'm going to keep the top left image, because what we're doing here is actually just creating more consistent references that we'll use later on. We also need slightly different poses again, so let's see if we can control that as well. Notice how I've specified that I want a frontal headshot and that Carla should be looking straight into the camera. This gives us this very coherent set of images. I'm going to keep the bottom right image because I really like that dual sort of braided bun style. Next, we'll change the prompt one more time. I've removed the earlier additions and only changed the shot to headshot from the side. Here's the new set of images. So clearly, we already have quite a bit of control over our new character. From these, I'll keep the bottom left one. Let's do one more because I want a really good one of her looking to the right. I've added looking to the right at the end of the prompt, but I probably could have just re-rolled the image as well. As you can see, it doesn't really make a big difference. So from this set, I'll take the bottom left one again. Okay, so now that we have our final set of image references, it's time to start using them to create lots of different portrait shots. Okay, so let's start off by rehashing our full prompt. First off, notice the 4 new image references at the beginning. The rest of the prompt is still roughly the same. The only difference really is the image weight parameter, which I've set to a value of 0.75. I mainly did this because I felt the image references were coming through a bit too much. However, what it also does, it allows us to retain more control over the portion that is the text prompt. So here's what Carla looks like now. Remember, you'll still have to re-roll every now and then and pick out the ones that you really like. But the overall consistency is really great in these. So how about we give Carla a smile? All I've done is add smiling with a half-open mouth at the end. And what we get is this very set of images right here. But we can also make Carla laugh. And of course, we can make her slightly upset as well. Remember, it's all in the prompt. So now it's time to have some real fun. I'd really like to show you what version 5 of Midjourney is capable of. We're going to continue working with our core prompt and all of its image references. Let's create a portrait shot of Carla standing in a Parisian street. Yeah, Paris. That's what I mean by Parisian. Parisien, or whatever. Just let's look at the prompt. So what's going on here? I've added wide angle shot of full body. This part won't matter just yet, but it will play a role a little bit later. I've also added standing in a small Parisian street. Finally, I've set the aspect ratio to 16:9, which will, for the most part, lock us into a close-up portrait. So here are our 4 images, and I personally think they look absolutely stunning. I almost feel like our Carla character, even though she looks different, is more consistent now than she was in version 4. So let's change things up a little bit and try to get more of her body into the shot. I've done two things here. First of all, I've added with her feet on the cobblestone road. This is meant to signal to Midjourney to show me more of her legs. We'll probably get a cowboy shot in the end, but if I don't add this, her body will be cut off much further up. I've also changed the aspect ratio to 4:5 to provide more space to actually display her body. And here's what the images look like. And if I change the aspect ratio to 9:16, then we get this set of images. Let's make another slight change. I'd like to change the color of her pants. I've added wearing beige colored pants into the prompt. However, unfortunately, Midjourney version 5 still isn't very good at assigning certain colors to particular objects and elements in the prompt. Or at least not unless they're like the primary element within the image itself. It clearly did pick up on the pants because in some of the earlier images, Carla was wearing a skirt. So let's try something else. I've replaced the earlier change with wearing jacket in blue color, wearing pants in white color. Now this time Midjourney properly assigns the color of the jacket, however the white color is still not given to the actual pants, but to her shirt instead. However, what we've just done with the jacket also works with a black jacket. Or in New York rather than in Paris. Notice how her clothing style is also changed to fit into the concept of a woman standing in New York rather than in Paris. Now I have one last surprise for you. You might be wondering, why didn't I just use the original image references that I used in version 4? I probably could have spared myself tons of work, right? Well, let's have a look at the sort of images that I get if I use these references with the very same prompt. You can clearly see the look and style of our original Carla shine through in these images. And yes, if you wanted to bring back a particular character from your work with version 4, then this is an approach that you could use. However, trust me, this is not going to work unless your text prompt already generates images that are relatively close to the type of style and image that you want. Just try it out for yourself and you'll see that it's not as simple as you might think. It works in this case simply because my text prompt is already pretty good on a standalone basis. I actually have one last piece of advice that I would really like to share with you. So the process I just showed you will work well for portrait images and reasonably well for images that primarily focus on the character. If you want to place your characters into a larger scene with action, then you can technically still use this process. However, you'll have to repeat the very first steps that we did in order to create a full body character concept first. Otherwise, Midjourney will tend to continue to focus on portrait style shots of your character. Remember, just because version 5 works slightly differently, that doesn't mean that all of your previous knowledge about character design is suddenly completely obsolete. In fact, I didn't really change all that much about how I did things in this process. So if you haven't already watched my full series on character design, then check out some of the best ones, or just binge on the whole series right away. If you learned something today, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. That way you can keep on learning, and I'll see you next time. Take care.